Hey, and welcome back to Totally Accurate, where we dive deep into the darkest stories the internet has to offer. Today, I've got something special for you, something chilling. So let me ask you, have you ever heard a lullaby playing in an empty house? Have you ever seen a child staring at you from the edge of a field, and when you blink she's gone? That's exactly what happened to Sarah, a filmmaker who went searching for ghost stories, but found the silent one instead. A house haunted by stitched mouths, shadowy figures behind mirrors, and a girl named Eleanor who was forgotten, but not gone. In this video, I'm telling her story, a terrifying descent into madness, where silence isn't safe, it's lethal. So grab your headphones, turn off the lights, and whatever you do, don't stop listening, because when the clock strikes 3:17, the silent one comes for you, too. Let's get into it. Sarah Langley squinted through the cracked windshield of her car as the first raindrops splattered against the glass. The long, winding road leading to the farmhouse twisted like a serpent through the forest. Gnarled branches clawed at the edges of the narrow dirt path, and her tires groaned as they fought the muddy incline. She muttered under her breath, "Should have checked the weather report." Her GPS had lost signal 20 minutes ago, but there was only one road in, and the farmhouse had to be close. She gripped the steering wheel tighter as the trees began to thin, revealing a clearing, and there it stood, her new home. It was bigger than she'd imagined. The house loomed against the gray sky, its pale, weather-beaten clapboards streaked with moss and rot. The windows were dark, glass panes reflecting nothing but empty, overgrown fields. A single porch light flickered above the front steps, as if it had been waiting for her. Sarah parked and stepped out into the wet grass. Her boots squelched in the mud. She took a deep breath. The air smelled of pine, damp earth, and something else, an old, metallic tang she couldn't place. "Home sweet home," she said, forcing a smile. She opened the trunk and began unloading her suitcases and boxes, each one a reminder of what she had left behind: divorce papers, half-finished manuscripts, a life in New York City that had imploded under pressure. As she heaved the last box onto the porch, the front door creaked open on its own. Sarah froze. "Hello?" she called, peering inside. Silence. It must have been the wind, she told herself, though the air was still. With a shrug, she stepped into the foyer. The floor groaned beneath her weight. Dust motes danced in the dim light filtering through the lace curtains. The living room stretched to her right, filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. A fireplace dominated the far wall, above which hung a faded portrait of a family she didn't recognize. She turned to the left and found the kitchen. The fridge was ancient, and a cast-iron stove sat in the corner. An old rotary phone hung on the wall, disconnected. She frowned and pulled out her cell phone. No bars. "Of course," she muttered. "Classic horror movie setup." Her voice echoed, swallowed by the stillness. Upstairs, she found the bedrooms, 3 of them. She chose the one at the end of the hall. It had the least dust and a large window overlooking the field. As she set her suitcase down, something caught her eye, a child's doll sitting on the windowsill. Porcelain, with glassy blue eyes and a cracked cheek. She picked it up. A name was scrawled on the dress in faded ink, Eleanor. A chill traced her spine. Sarah placed the porcelain doll back on the windowsill, careful not to drop it. The cracked cheek seemed to grin at her under the waning light. She shook off a shiver and turned away. "Creepy little thing," she muttered. Outside, dusk fell fast. Rain tapped gently against the window, and shadows stretched along the floorboards like fingers. Sarah busied herself unpacking, but her mind kept drifting, back to the city, back to Nathan and the long nights of silence before the divorce. Her agent's voice echoed in her mind. "You just need space to write, Sarah. Time to heal." Well, she had space now. Plenty of it. Later that night, after a meager dinner of reheated leftovers and wine, she settled onto the old couch in the living room with her laptop. The fireplace was cold, and though she'd found chopped wood in the shed out back, she hadn't worked up the courage to try the ancient hearth yet. Instead, she wrapped herself in a blanket and started typing. Chapter 1. Nothing came. She stared at the blinking cursor. Her thoughts drifted again, to the house. There was something heavy about it. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind through the old chimney, felt like a whisper just beyond hearing. At 11:45 p.m., she gave up. Her eyelids drooped, and the wine had dulled the edge of her restlessness. She climbed the stairs, each step protesting under her weight. In the hallway, she paused. The doll was no longer on the windowsill. Sarah's pulse quickened. "What the hell?" she whispered. She scanned the floor. There, in the corner near the door, the doll sat upright, its empty blue eyes staring at her. She knelt, reaching out to touch it, but hesitated. A creak echoed from behind her. Sarah spun around. Nothing. The hallway was empty, just the old wallpaper peeling at the edges and the dim light of the moon filtering through dusty glass. She picked up the doll with trembling fingers, placed it back on the windowsill, and walked quickly to her room, locking the door behind her. She lay in bed that night listening to the wind. The house sighed and groaned, and every sound felt magnified in the dark. Just as she began to drift off, the clock on her phone glowed. 3:17 a.m. Then thump. A heavy footstep above her. She sat up, heart racing. Another step. And another. Slow. Deliberate. Right above her head. "There's no attic," she whispered. She was certain. She'd explored the house top to bottom. The footsteps stopped. Silence. She held her breath. Then came the creak of the floorboards, right outside her door. Sarah scrambled out of bed and pressed her ear to the wood. She could hear breathing. Low, ragged breathing. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the doorknob, hesitating. Suddenly, the breathing stopped. She yanked open the door. Empty hallway. But the doll, now it was sitting right in front of her door. Its cracked face stared up at her, and this time, its mouth looked different, as if someone had sewn it shut. Sarah back. Away, her pulse thundering in her ears. From downstairs came the soft, unmistakable sound of a music box playing a lullaby. Sarah's feet remained planted, her breath shallow and rapid. The doll sat in front of her like a sentinel, the soft strains of music curling up the stairs, a delicate, eerie tune, slow and off-key. It was coming from the living room. "No way," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She hadn't unpacked any music boxes. She didn't even own one. Grabbing her phone for light, Sarah crept down the hallway, avoiding the doll. The stairs groaned beneath each careful step as she descended, and with every footfall, the lullaby grew louder. As she reached the base of the stairs, the tune stopped abruptly. The silence was suffocating. She stepped into the living room. Her phone's flashlight swept over the covered furniture, the darkened fireplace, and finally, the coffee table. There, on top of a stack of yellow newspapers, sat an antique music box. Its lid was open. A tiny ballerina, frozen mid-twirl, stood inside. Sarah approached slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The air in the room felt colder than before, as if the fireplace was pulling warmth from the walls. The ballerina's eyes were painted black. She slammed the lid shut. Suddenly, knock knock knock, 3 sharp raps at the front door made her jump out of her skin. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She spun around, heart in her throat, and stared at the door. Another knock, louder this time. Then silence. She crouched, fumbling for her phone. The screen was cracked but still lit. She turned on the flashlight again, its beam shaking as she approached the door. "Who's there?" she called, her voice cracking. No answer. She peered through the peephole. Darkness. She reached for the knob but stopped. Something moved outside, just at the edge of her vision. A shape. A child, standing at the bottom of the porch steps, dressed in white. Sarah's breath caught. She blinked and the figure was gone. Just mist and rain outside now. "No. I'm seeing things. It's the stress, that's all." Too much wine, too little sleep. She stepped back from the door, her skin crawling. Behind her, the music box began to play again, this time, faster. She turned. The box was open again, spinning wildly on its own. Without thinking, she snatched it up and threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall, the ballerina's tiny limbs snapping off. The music stopped. Sarah stood in the silence, chest heaving, until a sharp, high-pitched giggle echoed from upstairs. A child's laugh. She bolted up the stairs two at a time, flinging open her bedroom door. The doll was gone. Her blankets were strewn across the floor. On her pillow lay a single thread, long and black, just like the stitches on the doll's mouth. Sarah stared at the black thread lying across her pillow. Thin, coarse, and frayed at the ends, it looked like it had been torn from something, or someone. She picked it up with trembling fingers, the rough texture scraping against her skin. "Okay, no," she muttered, her voice shaking. "This is not happening." She needed answers. Rational ones. Sleep-deprived minds played tricks. Houses creaked. Old objects shifted. There had to be an explanation. She turned on every light in the house, from the attic, yes, she found a narrow hatch she hadn't noticed before, to the basement. The attic was empty except for cobwebs and an old trunk she didn't dare open yet. The basement was dark, damp, and filled with the smell of mildew. Tools hung rusting on pegboards, and an old washing machine sat crooked on its side. No dolls. No music boxes. No sign of a child. By dawn, Sarah hadn't slept. She brewed the last of her coffee and stood at the window, staring into the mist-covered fields. The storm had passed, but a thick fog clung to the earth, hiding the tree-line in ghostly white. She pulled out her laptop, determined to write something, to anchor herself. But as she opened the lid, she found a new document on the desktop. Untitled. She hadn't created it. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad. She clicked it open. Inside was a single line of text, in a font she didn't recognize. "She watches when you sleep." The cursor blinked beneath the sentence. Sarah's throat tightened. Her hands shook as she closed the laptop and backed away. "Okay. No. Someone's messing with me." She checked all the windows, still locked. The doors latched. She searched every room again, even behind the furniture. Still nothing. By afternoon, the fog had lifted. Desperate for a break, Sarah grabbed her coat and headed outside. Maybe fresh air would clear her head. She walked the perimeter of the house, boots crunching on gravel and wet leaves. That's when she saw it. Tiny footprints in the mud. Leading away from the house toward the woods. Child-sized. She knelt beside them. The prints were fresh. Very fresh. The ground was still damp. Her gaze followed the trail to the tree line. Something moved between the trees, a flutter of white fabric. "Hello?" she called. Silence. And then, singing. Soft, distant, a child's voice humming the same lullaby from the music box. Sarah stumbled backward, nearly slipping in the mud. The singing stopped. She turned and ran back to the house. Inside, her phone finally pinged, a single bar of signal. A text came through from an unknown number. "Don't go into the woods. She doesn't like it." Sarah dropped the phone. It buzzed again. 3:17. "She's coming." Sarah's fingers trembled as she picked up the phone. The messages from the unknown number remained on the screen, the last one chilling her to the bone. 3:17. "She's coming." She quickly dialed back the number. The call didn't even ring. It went straight to a dead line. Frustrated and panicked, she opened her contacts. Maybe it was Nathan. A cruel prank? But Nathan didn't have this number. It was a temporary burner phone she'd bought after the divorce, something she hadn't even shared with friends yet. Another text arrived. "You broke the music box. She's angry now." Sarah dropped the phone on the counter, backing away. Her mind raced. This wasn't random. Someone was watching her, knew her every move. Maybe it was Nathan. He always hated her riding retreats, called them escapes. Could he have followed her here? She stormed into the living room, looking again at the shattered remains of the music box. The ballerina's broken face stared up at her, one tiny arm pointing toward the fireplace. Something inside the hearth caught Sarah's eye. She crouched, brushing aside soot and debris. A small book lay half buried in the ashes. She pulled it free. The cover was leather, scorched at the edges, and stained with dark blotches. No title. Inside, yellowed pages filled with cramped, looping handwriting. She flipped to the first page. Property of Martha Whitlock, 1874. A name. Finally. Sarah read on. She came to us first in the spring. A child, pale and silent, standing in the field. No shoes, no voice, just watching. My husband thought her lost. We took her in. We shouldn't have. Sarah's mouth went dry. She turned the page. Eleanor, she wouldn't speak. She only watched. And at night we heard her footsteps. In the attic. In the walls. By summer we couldn't sleep. Then came the music box. It played on its own. Always at 3:17 a.m. Sarah's breath caught. The same time. She flipped through more entries, pages detailing nightmares, strange events, the growing dread that infected the Whitlock family. My daughter stitched her mouth shut. Said Eleanor told her to. Said the silent one needed quiet. Now the house is silent. Except for the music. The last entry was smeared and hard to read. I tried to burn it. The music box. The doll. But they came back. Always. She comes back. We are part of her now. Sarah slammed the journal shut, heart hammering. She looked toward the fireplace again. The soot shifted. Tiny, childlike handprints smeared the bricks. The air grew colder, the light dimmer. From upstairs, a door creaked open. A whisper drifted down the hall. Sarah! Sarah! The whisper slithered down the staircase like smoke, curling around her, chilling her to the marrow. She stood frozen in the living room, the burned journal clenched in her hand. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get out of the house, but she couldn't move. Her legs felt rooted to the floor. Sarah! Again, the voice, closer this time. Soft, childlike, but stretched thin with something else behind it. Malice. Hunger. Her gaze flicked toward the staircase. The upper landing was cloaked in shadow, but she could see the door to the far bedroom. Her bedroom, swinging gently, creaking on its hinges. The door she had locked. No. She crept up the stairs, each step painfully loud. She reached the top and hesitated outside her bedroom door. The air here was thick, heavy, and cold. Her breath misted in front of her, as though she had stepped into a freezer. The door swung open fully. Inside, the room had changed. The doll was back, Eleanor, sitting in the middle of the bed. But now, her head was tilted, and the stitches on her mouth looked newer, fresher. Black thread hung loose from her lips, trailing off the edge of the bed. On the floor below her pillow sat another object, a pair of small, rusted scissors, speckled with dried blood. Sarah stumbled backward into the hallway. She turned to run, but the hallway was longer than before. Much longer. Impossible. Doors lined the walls now, dozens of them, stretching endlessly in both directions. Each was slightly ajar, revealing slivers of darkness behind them. Then came the sound, footsteps, many of them. Light, rapid, childlike. Dozens of them, running behind the doors, crossing from one room to the next. Giggles echoed. Some high, some guttural, distorted. Her heart pounded. She ran. The doors slammed shut one by one behind her with deafening bangs, each slammed closer than the last. She reached the end of the hall, or what she thought was the end, and flung open a door. Darkness. It wasn't her bedroom anymore. It was another room entirely. Inside was a child's nursery. The wallpaper was faded, covered in tiny faded sheep and moons. A wooden rocking chair sat in the corner, gently swaying though no one sat in it. A crib stood in the center of the room. Sarah approached it, each step hesitant. Inside the crib lay a doll identical to Eleanor, but its eyes were open wide, mouth unstitched, a silent scream carved into its porcelain features. Suddenly, the mobile above the crib began to spin, playing the familiar lullaby. The same, slow, warped tune. From the rocking chair came a voice. Low. Hoarse. She watched us sleep. We stitched her mouth. But she watches still. Sarah spun around. The chair was empty. But etched into the wall behind it, scratched deep into the plaster, were the words. 3:17. She always comes at 3:17. Sarah backed out of the room. The hallway was gone. Only darkness remained. Sarah stared into the blackness where the hallway had been. Her breathing came in short gasps, heart pounding like a drum in her ears. Behind her, the nursery door slowly creaked closed, sealing her in darkness. No, she whispered, groping blindly for the door frame. Her fingers found the edge of the wall, cold and rough. She stumbled forward, feeling her way. The floor beneath her feet no longer felt like wood. It was softer, almost spongy, like damp earth. Then came the whisper again, closer this time. Sarah. This time, it was not just in her ears, it was inside her head. She spun, trying to find the source, but the darkness was absolute. She fumbled for her phone, flipping on the flashlight. It flickered, then died. Dead battery. Panic surged. She turned in circles, desperate for any light, any direction. Then, far off, she saw it, a faint glow, like a candle flickering behind a door. She ran. The ground shifted beneath her, wet and sucking at her feet. She stumbled, fell hard onto her hands, and felt them sink into cold mud. Except, it wasn't mud. She pulled her hand back and screamed. Blood. Dark, viscous, and warm. The floor beneath her wasn't earth, it was flesh. Pale, rubbery skin stretched beneath her, covered in a thin layer of blood and hair. Tiny, stitched mouths yawned open across the floor, silent, toothless. Sarah scrambled to her feet, bow rising in her throat. She sprinted toward the light. The door loomed before her, half open. She pushed it wide and fell into the room beyond. It was the foyer. She was back at the front of the house. Light streamed in through the windows now. Daylight. Morning. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. Had she dreamed it? Hallucinated it? The wine, the stress, the sleeplessness, it had to be. She stood shakily and reached for the front door. It opened easily. Outside, the world looked normal again. The fog had lifted, the sky clear. Birds chirped. She stepped onto the porch, breathing in the fresh air, trying to steady herself. A figure stood in the field. Small. White dress. Facing away. Sarah's blood ran cold. Hello? She called, her voice shaking. The child turned. It was the girl from her dream. From the woods. Her mouth was sewn shut. Sarah stumbled backward, slamming the door. She bolted it, then ran to her car, throwing open the door. Keys. Where were the keys? She tore through her purse, her hands shaking, her eyes darting toward the house, toward the windows. A face stared at her from the upstairs window. Not the doll. Herself. She was staring down at herself. Sarah screamed. Then everything went black. Darkness. Silence. Sarah's eyes snapped open, and she gasped, sitting up violently. She was no longer in her car. She was in her bed. Daylight streamed in through the cracked window. Birds chirped softly outside. Everything looked normal. The doll was gone. The room was clean. Her suitcase, her clothes, all neatly folded. Her laptop sat on the desk, untouched. No, 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 Sarah whispered. She leapt from the bed, checking her phone. It was fully charged. The time read 8:32 a.m. She ran to the window, peering out. The field was empty. No girl. She stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes looked hollow, her skin pale. It wasn't real, she told herself. A nightmare. An incredibly vivid nightmare. She'd fallen asleep at her laptop, maybe. Dreamed the whole thing. That's when she noticed the black thread on the floor. Just like before. Her stomach lurched. Slowly, she turned back toward the bedroom. On the nightstand sat the music box. Unbroken. Perfect. Its lid was closed. Her hands shook as she approached it. She reached out, touched the lid, and it creaked open on its own. The ballerina twirled slowly. The lullaby began again. Sarah screamed and slammed it shut, backing away. "No, no! I destroyed you!" A creak behind her. She turned, heart racing. In the mirror, her reflection did not move. She was frozen, but her reflection was smiling. A slow, grotesque grin that stretched too wide. Sarah backed away, but her reflection stepped forward. The glass shimmered, rippled like water. The reflection raised a hand and pressed it against the inside of the mirror. A whisper echoed in the room. "Let me out." Sarah's knees buckled. "No. I'm losing my mind." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her. The mirror began to crack, spiderweb lines radiating from where the reflection's hand pressed against it. Blood seeped from the cracks. Her own voice echoed through the room. "But twisted, hollow. You brought her back." The room shuddered. The walls shifted, pulsing like living tissue. The floor beneath her feet rippled. The door wouldn't open. The music box began to play faster. In the mirror, her reflection was no longer Sarah. It was Eleanor, dressed in white, her stitched mouth bleeding, eyes hollow, black pits. And she was reaching through the glass. Sarah stumbled backward as Eleanor's hand broke through the mirror, shards of glass falling like icy rain around her. The air turned frigid. Every breath she took burned her lungs. Her legs felt numb, her feet rooted to the trembling floor. The girl stepped through the mirror. But she wasn't a girl anymore. She was taller, impossibly thin, bones pressing sharply against translucent skin. Her dress, what was once white, was now tattered, stained with old blood and soot. Her eyes were hollow pits, leaking black tears. The stitches on her mouth dangled loose, unraveling. Sarah screamed and ran to the door, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Behind her, Eleanor's bare feet dragged across the wooden floor, slow, deliberate. Sarah pounded the door. "Help me! Someone, please!" The light flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness between pulses. In the flashes, Sarah saw Eleanor's face, closer. Another flicker, right behind her. She turned, nothing. Then, a whisper. "You let me out, now let me in." The temperature plummeted. Her breath came in clouds of white. The walls pulsed, and from behind the wallpaper came muffled voices, whispers, hundreds of them. She backed against the door, sobbing. Then, silence. The light died. Everything was pitch black. Sarah sank to the floor, covering her ears, rocking. "I'm not here. I'm not here," she chanted. The lullaby started again. Not from the music box. From inside the walls. The wallpaper began to bulge, like something pressing against it. Hands, tiny hands, stretched the paper, clawing at it from the inside. "Let us out!" Sarah screamed and kicked at the wall. Her foot punched through the plaster, and cold fingers grabbed her ankle. She yanked free and scrambled toward the window. It wouldn't open. She smashed it with a lamp. Glass shattered. Wind howled in. But outside wasn't the field anymore. It was the nursery. Endless rows of cribs stretched into the distance under a blood-red sky. From the cribs came silent children, mouths sewn shut, eyes hollow. Eleanor stood among them. She raised her hand and pointed at Sarah. Then, they all began to scream. Silently. Sarah collapsed, covering her ears, though no sound came. Her mind flooded with it, not sound, but pain, as if the very air stabbed her brain. She felt her mind cracking. A final voice whispered in her skull. 3:17, we take you too. Her vision faded. Darkness swallowed her whole. Sarah's world dissolved into an endless void, suspended between moments of breathless nothingness and stabbing flashes of terror. When her eyes fluttered open again, she was no longer in her bedroom, no longer in the nursery, no longer anywhere she recognized. She stood in a cavernous hall, endless and stretching far beyond sight. The walls were made of twisted bone and dark wood, pulsing faintly with a sickly red light. Shadows moved unnaturally along the edges. Ahead of her stood a circle of dolls. Not the porcelain kind. These were lifeless children, faces frozen in silence, mouths stitched closed with black thread, eyes wide and empty. In the center of the circle was Eleanor, taller, more grotesque, her stitched mouth fresh and tight as if she had just sewn it shut. The dolls whispered in unison, their voices threading together into one chilling harmony. "Welcome to the hour of silence." Sarah's throat went dry. She tried to scream, but no sound came. She looked down and saw her own mouth had been sewn shut. Panic surged as she clawed at the threads. Eleanor stepped forward, holding a pair of gleaming scissors dripping with blackened blood. "You brought me back," Eleanor hissed. "Now you belong here. With us. Forever silent." Sarah's heart hammered. She tried to pull away, but unseen hands gripped her arms, cold and merciless. The circle tightened. A clock chimed somewhere far above, its sound twisted and hollow. 3:17. The music box tune echoed around her, distorted into a scream. Eleanor raised the scissors. Eleanor's scissors gleamed like black ice in the dim red light. Sarah's chest heaved as the cold hands tightened their grip, holding her fast. The circle of silent dolls closed in, their hollow eyes fixed on her. "No!" Sarah thought desperately. "There has to be a way out. There has to be a way." The scissors lowered, slow, deliberate. Suddenly, a piercing sound shattered the heavy silence, the crackling of a match. A tiny flame flickered to life. The circle of dolls recoiled as if burned. The red glow flickered and dimmed. From the shadows stepped an old woman, her face lined with years and sorrow. Her eyes burned with fierce determination. "Sarah," she said, voice trembling but strong, "you are not theirs to claim." She threw a burning stick into the circle. Flames erupted. The dolls screamed, silently, but their stitched mouths unraveled, and cracks spread across their faces. Eleanor shrieked, a soundless, terrifying wail, and retreated. The circle shattered like brittle glass. Sarah gasped, gasping for air, feeling the stitches loosen on her lips. She tore at them until the thread snapped. She coughed and screamed. The old woman extended her hand. "Come! We have little time." Sarah took it. The cavern pulsed and trembled. Behind them, the shadows twisted into horrible shapes. The music box melody grew frantic, urgent. They ran, down twisted corridors of bone and darkness. The clock's hollow chime echoed again. 3:17. Sarah's mind screamed, "Fight it. Don't let her win." The old woman whispered, "The silent one feeds on silence, on fear. Your voice is your weapon." Sarah nodded, breath ragged. They burst through a door and into blinding light. The blinding light stung Sarah's eyes as she stumbled out of the dark, bone-walled cavern. She blinked rapidly, adjusting to the warm glow of the sun. Around her stretched a vast meadow, wildflowers swaying in a gentle breeze. The oppressive weight of the nightmare world seemed to lift, replaced by an eerie calm. But Sarah knew better. "The silent one isn't defeated," the old woman warned, her voice soft but urgent. "She clings to the shadows in your mind, and in that house. You must find your voice and keep it. Only then can you banish her." Sarah nodded, clutching the journal Martha Whitlock had given her, now glowing faintly with strange runes etched in the margins. Suddenly, a cold wind swept across the meadow, carrying with it the faint echo of a lullaby, the same twisted tune from the music box. Sarah shuddered, then forced herself to sing aloud. Not the lullaby. Her own voice, raw and trembling, but real. Her voice broke the silence like a blade. The wind died instantly. The sun shone brighter. A path of light appeared, leading away from the meadow toward the silhouette of the old farmhouse. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the power of her own voice ripple through the air. But the house loomed ahead like a dark beast, windows like empty eyes staring. "Stay strong," the old woman said. "This is where the battle truly begins." As they approached the front door, Sarah felt the presence of the Silent One like a cold hand on her soul. But this time, she would fight. The creak of the front door echoed through the empty house, a sound that felt heavier than before, laden with memories and whispered threats. Sarah stepped inside, the old woman close behind. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of decay. Shadows seemed to crawl along the walls, writhing like living things. The house remembered her, every step, every breath. "Keep your voice steady," the old woman whispered, gripping Sarah's arm. "She listens for silence." Sarah's heart hammered as she moved through the foyer, the floorboards groaning beneath her feet. The music box sat on a nearby table, its lid shut tight. No music played. She swallowed hard, steeling herself. "Eleanor," she whispered, "I'm not afraid of you." From the darkness upstairs, a cold breeze swept down the staircase, carrying with it a faint, eerie giggle. "Sarah," the voice called, low and hollow. Her blood ran cold. She gripped the journal, feeling the strange warmth of the runes. Upstairs, the door to the attic stood slightly ajar. "Let's end this," the old woman said. They climbed the narrow stairs. Each step creaked ominously. At the attic door, Sarah paused. The darkness beyond seemed alive, watching. She took a deep breath and spoke clearly, voice ringing in the silence. "Eleanor, I see you. You are not a shadow. You are not a ghost. You are a scared child who needs to be free." The attic door swung open. Inside was the music box, glowing faintly on a dusty table. Around it, shadows twisted and coalesced into the figure of Eleanor, smaller now, less threatening. Sarah stepped forward. "It's okay," she whispered. "You can speak. You can be heard." The stitched mouth began to move, unraveling slowly. Eleanor's eyes met Sarah's, filled with loneliness and sorrow. "I'm lost," the voice cracked, barely a whisper. Sarah knelt beside her. "We'll find the way out. Together." The house groaned, the shadows retreating as light flooded the attic. The music box played a soft, hopeful tune. Sarah's voice rose with the melody. The Silent One's grip weakened. Freedom was near. The attic seemed to breathe around them, shadows retreating but still lingering in the corners like wary animals. Eleanor, smaller and more fragile than before, sat on the dusty floor, her unstitched mouth trembling as she whispered the words Sarah barely caught. "I was forgotten." Sarah nodded gently. "You were lost in silence. But silence isn't the end." The old woman approached a broken window and pried it open. A breeze rushed in, scattering dust motes, and carrying with it the scent of rain and pine. "It's time to heal the house," she said, her voice steady. Sarah felt the weight of years, the grief, fear, and sorrow that clung to the walls like a suffocating fog. The house wasn't just a place. It was a vessel of pain, feeding on silence and secrets. The music box's melody swelled, filling the room with light. Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out the journal, the runes glowing brighter now. She opened it to the last page. The words were written in trembling script. "To break the silence, speak the truth aloud. Only then will the walls fall and the lost find peace." Sarah took a deep breath and spoke clearly, every word a prayer. "I know your story. I know your pain. You were forgotten, silenced, and left behind. But I see you now. You are not alone." The house groaned, the floor shaking beneath them. Eleanor's figure began to glow, her stitched mouth fully healed, eyes clear and warm. The shadows screamed, a soundless, shattering scream, and then shattered like glass. Light poured through the attic windows, flooding every corner. The oppressive weight lifted. The house was no longer a prison. Eleanor smiled, reaching out to Sarah's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. Outside, the sky cleared. Sarah felt the warmth of the sun on her skin. She was free. The house stood quiet, bathed in golden afternoon light. The oppressive shadows had lifted, leaving behind only memories and the faint scent of cedar and old paper. Sarah stepped onto the porch, breathing deeply. The weight of months of fear and torment finally began to ease from her shoulders. The meadow beyond stretched peacefully, wildflowers dancing in the breeze. Beside her, the old woman smiled gently. "You did what many could not. You gave her a voice," she said softly. Sarah nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "I just wish I had known sooner. Maybe then, none of this would have happened." The old woman shook her head. "The house feeds on silence, but it is also a mirror. It reflects what's inside us, our fears, our pain. You faced yours." Sarah glanced back at the front door. For a moment, she thought she saw a flicker in the window, a shadow, a figure, then it was gone. Her heart quickened. "Is it really over?" she whispered. The old woman looked toward the horizon, eyes clouded but knowing. "Silence is never truly broken. It just waits. And sometimes it listens." Sarah shivered, the breeze carrying a soft, haunting melody, the music box's lullaby, far off, just beyond hearing. She turned away, stepping into the sunlight. But as the door slowly creaked shut behind her, the faintest whisper slipped through the crack. "Don't forget me." And that was the story of the Silent One. If you're still with me, and you haven't looked over your shoulder yet, congrats. You've survived, for now. But remember, stories like this aren't just fiction for some people. Old houses, forgotten tragedies, and things that move when they shouldn't, they leave their mark. Just like Eleanor did. So tell me in the comments, do you believe in haunted houses? Have you ever heard something you couldn't explain? I read every comment, and who knows, your story might be featured in a future episode. If you enjoyed this nightmare, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a tale from the dark side. I've got more horror coming soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. Until then, stay safe, stay alert, and remember, silence is never empty. It just waits. This is Totally Accurate, signing off. For now, good night.